we were talking about Russia's kind of stuck. They can't stop the war, and they can't keep the war going because they're losing so much money. They're losing so many men. Um, sanctions are definitely starting to bite. Let's pick up there again. So, what what do you think happens to Russia after the war?
There are several possibilities, and it really depends on like a lot of key factors. First of all, the main problem of Russia is the concentration of resources in basically in one hands. Uh, Putin is the person who accumulated all the power and all the wealth, and he surrounded himself with yes people who who are not
Hmm.
fighters. And that means that the whole hierarchy of the state's people, they they are afraid for themselves, for their own security, and for the security of their families. But they know that if something bad happens to Putin, that means that something bad will happen to them.
Hello and welcome. Now, before we get started this week, I have to point out that we had some technical issues, so you might be seeing some edits in there. Our guest this week on The Edge is Elvira Bary, and she is a Russian author, she's a scholar, and she has her own YouTube channel here. And I've long wanted to talk to her because, in many ways, we kind of mirror one another. She, a Russian who has moved to the USA, and me, an American who moved to Moscow and has now spent decades traveling around the former empire. So we're kind of juxtaposed. Uh, I didn't see eye to eye with her on every topic we discuss, but nevertheless, I think it's important to continue having these kinds of conversations because it's only through open dialogue that we are ever going to get to a place where we understand one another's countries, peoples, and cultures a little bit better. So, Elvira Bary, hello and welcome well, good evening from Kiev, but good
Good
morning
morning.
in Los Angeles. Thank you for joining us. There's so much that we could talk about. I've watched your channel. I've enjoyed it very much. It lays things out very in a way that's very consumable and understandable, and I appreciate that. That's our objective as well here at On the Edge. And I know that if we really wanted to dig deep into some conversations, we could probably spend a couple hours. So, in order to keep it kind of to the hour long length, I'm going to jump right in. Most important question I have to ask you, of course, uh, talking to you from Ukraine, is what do Russians think of the war here in Ukraine?
It really depends on a Russian because because we are Russia is such a diverse country. It's not only by nationality, it's by social class, by education. Like people are so different, and I can just summarize the whole like structure, social structure, to just explain what's going on. So after the Soviet Union collapsed, we basically had three major classes. The first is the people who belong to the elite. They mm, basically stayed the same. They just changed labels. But the prominent families in Moscow and top cities, they are all have very deep connections with their state, with the state budgets, and with siloviki, with
Mm-hmm.
people, the strongmen, the people who work for police, for army, for people with guns, basically. And then
Yeah.
and then there's low class taxpayers or uh, sir, Basically, that's the former serfs.
And this is the biggest number.
Biggest
This is
number,
the biggest number.
biggest number.
Yeah.
The people used to live for like not even decades, centuries, feeling that politics is not their thing. They can't influence any decision. They can't do anything about their lives, and so the only responsibility they have is the responsibility to their families and to their maybe subordinate bosses. That's it. And then there is a very small layer, very thin layer. In Russian, it's intelligentsia. And even this small section of the society is divided. There are educated people who think beyond the borders of their like family life, the small world. They're interested in what's going on in the world. They have enough education, at least read something, understand something, and the chasm between those worlds is huge. So the elite tries to recruit at least a part of intelligentsia. Because those people, they bring knowledge, bring know-how, they have connections, and they can communicate some ideas to the rest of the Russians. And besides that, we have national minorities. Maybe I'm from Central Russia, and when I grew up,
right, you were born in Nizhny Novgorod, correct?
Yeah, the former Gorky city. And
Yes.
and right now, Nizhny Novgorod is. I was surprised to learn that Nizhny Novgorod was basically a hub of. It was like a brain hub for modern. For modern Putinism ideology, because Sergei Kiriyenko and Nemtsov before him, they were all from Nizhny Novgorod, and they are clans.
That's right.
Yeah. Right behind them, there are like dozens or even hundreds of people who came with them to Moscow to build something, because Russia basically it's a feudal state. And the Soviet regime, it didn't bring modernity to Russia. It just froze it in times. Right. So we defaulted to 1914 when the Soviet Union collapsed. So you see the ideology right now, all this militarism, imperialism, all the isms, they are from 1914, right before World War One.
Yeah, it's very feudal. Yeah, it's a very czarist empire, imperial system with Putin at the top.
Like at that time, every European nation was like that. They were all racists. Yes. They were all imperialists. Everybody believed in their sacred imperial right to rule the world, at least a part of it. But since in Western world there was freedom of speech and freedom of like mental. Basically, it's freedom of speech and intellectual conversation, and people in the West
and a ballot and a vote.
They created a new system. The main principle of it is win-win. It was developed in 1945. Of course, it's very difficult. Of course, nobody is ever happy with what's going on, but at least it gives us technology, it gives us development, it gives us basically prosperity. Because if we look back to the beginning of 20th century, like 90% of population in the West were poor, dirt poor. Of course, they were richer than Russian peasants, but still, life was struggle. Right now, like we have totally different problems about self-actualization, self-realization. Like 100 years ago, we didn't even have the idea of that your job, you have to love your job. It was alien. Nobody even thought about that, because you work to feed yourself and your family. That's it. And right now, people think like about what can I do to contribute to society? What is my purpose? Can I self-actualize myself? This is the totally different level. But in Russia, we froze in time. We just like fell into the chasm for basically for 100 years, and a lot of people were not ready to meet the world. And another huge problem was of the I'll always, in my videos on my YouTube channel, Elvira Bary, I talk about this problem, Iron Curtain, because from the very beginning, the Russian government made sure that connection with the outside world was a privilege. It was the top of the privileges. Only the elite could communicate with foreigners, any foreigners. And the West was the top priority. If you have connections with the West, Germany, France, Great Britain, United States, Japan, even Japan, then that meant that you made it. And since the people were cut off from all this source of information, knowledge, know-how, anything, but just like French powder was a bribe, and lipstick was a bribe, jeans, tights,
denim,
even gum. Yeah. It was something precious, and I remember it was in my childhood. If you had a foreign gum, you don't throw away the wrapper. You keep it, because that it's a proof that you, at least in one period of your life, you had something, you had connection. And what happened with the country that lived like that? It is very divided. Elite had access to all these goodies, and the rest of them was not. And education and information and just connectivity was broken. And what we have right now, that all this propaganda is possible just because people don't speak languages. Most of them never traveled outside Russia, or at least Russian, the former republics. It's very easy to lie to them about the intentions of the West, because people were raised on the narratives from the Soviet era. And who are the people who are actually talking heads? They are older than me, or the same age as me. So their childhood was in the Soviet Union. They were brainwashed from the very beginning. And even if they don't believe themselves in what is said, they at least know these narratives. They know how to build it. And the rest, they're just nodding and said like, yeah. So your question was like, what is the attitude of Russians? It really depends on your background, who you are, where you came from.
Yeah.
And what your parents taught you. For me, when I grew up, when the Soviet Union collapsed, I was 17, 16, 16, 17, I don't remember. Again, I'm so bad with math, but it doesn't matter. So I was young, and it was the feeling that the whole world is open for us. We can achieve anything if you feel talent, if you feel that you can be something different, and you can contribute, you can build a better Russia. It feels that you can. It was possible. But for my parents, for example, they lived in the narrative that you can do anything. Just try to carve the small plot of reality for yourself and your family, and try to make it better, decent, at least decent. That was the mindset of my parents, and of course of my grandparents. We were different. And if you notice what people start doing in Russia during Putin's times, they just dive into this idea of improving their small patch of life for themselves, for their family, because that's the basic needs. You can't rebuild the country if you feel that your children don't have what they should have. You take care of your family first. And since Russian people never had a chance to do anything like that, see, the slow growth of prosperity in the West, it was a long process. So there was not that frenzy of grabbing or earning or making careers. But in Russia, it was just squeezed in 30 years. 25, 30 years, when it felt like a window of possibilities. That right now it's possible. And the history of your family tells you that this window could be closed anytime. So when the war started, it was the feeling of this is it. The window is closing. And what a irregular person in this situation with this mindset, what he or she can do? Their first thought was about, I have to take care of myself and my family. And that's why nobody, like people, prefer to just look the other way. Because if you show the attitude towards the war in Ukraine, that means your personal catastrophe, and the personal catastrophe for everybody you know, like your inner circle. And people try to look away because they don't want to believe that the window of opportunity is closing. They want to stay in this in their like little. It was not a paradise. It was just, at least there was like environment where you can achieve something, and you hope that life will be better. Hope is very important for any human being. And right now, the Russian society is living in the feeling that there's no hope. Nothing will. It will be for decades. Everybody with like 5 brain cells understand that there something really bad happened to Russia, and right now they still have food on the store in the stores. A lot of people have increased salaries, and the feeling that there's something really bad going on, it's there. A friend of mine just came from St. Petersburg, and she came. She went there, and she just told me. She showed me the short screenshot.
She came to you in Los
No,
Angeles?
no, no. We talk. We talk through social media.
Sure.
She just told me
Right.
about her visit of St. Petersburg, and she shared her
Right.
impressions. Like, I asked her what it's like, and she said that the city is like in hangover. It's just sick. You feel that the people are still doing their business. They try to do their best. They try to look away. They try not to think about war, but it's there. You feel it. The air is heavy, and their officials are afraid that they could be arrested, because right now they have the new wave of purges. The businessmen afraid that there will be tax increase, or they afraid that they won't be able to continue doing their businesses, because the state wants the money for war, and they just squeeze the business. Or sometimes they just turn off their mobile internet at all, like zero. You go to Nevsky Prospect, the Central Avenue in St. Petersburg, and there's no internet. And for small businesses, that's a catastrophe, because you can they have orders. Russian economy is very much dependent on internet. It's maybe it's even better and more modern than in most of European countries, even here in the United States. And if you cut internet for the small businesses, they just broke. They don't know what to do, because all the orders go through all the payments, all the orders go through internet. So the friend of mine, she just showed me her screenshot from her phone, and there are like the raid is over. You can go out now, something like that. I don't remember the exact phrasing, but they have drones right now. So for 3.5 years, people really tried really hard to look the other way and pretend there's no war. And now war is there, and everybody knows that it will be only worse. And say goodbye to your peaceful life is really, really hard. A lot of people just try to live their lives because they genuinely believe they can do anything, and I'm pretty sure they can, because Russian opposition, people who believe in something else, they try to go on demonstrations. There were huge crowds in Moscow and other cities, but the police just go there and beat them, broke their legs and arms,
Yeah.
and they just arrested the ringleaders, or just people from the street. They just grabbed someone and gave them like 10 years in prison or 7. Of course, if you're like a person like me, you have a family, you have kids, you have your life, and if you're accused of why don't you protest? Oh, great. If somebody wants to protest with me, let's go. No, I prefer to see a person just to show the way how to do it, how to oppose a policeman who is twice my size, in full gear, and with a baton, the stick,
Baton. Yep.
baton, yeah.
Yep. Yep.
And I know that he
Uh-huh.
can.
I was on, yeah, I was on Bolotnaya Square, for example.
Oh,
when,
you saw
when
it.
Putin
You
came
saw it
back.
your firsthand.
Oh, I've seen it. I've seen Oman, the police, the riot control police in Moscow. I used to live in Moscow. I saw them many, many, many times, and the brutality.
See.
And they don't care about just gathering up,
Mm-hmm.
you know, as many people as they possibly can, throwing them brutally into vans, and you never see them again. I mean, that's a very common thing, But here's the other thing: you talk about growing up in the immediate aftermath of the Soviet Union in '90s Russia, Yeltsin's Russia, and that's when I lived in Russia, and I saw the rise of Vladimir Putin, and I saw the agreement that Putin made with the people of Russia. Give up your ideas of freedom. You might get a dacha. Maybe you're able to travel to Europe, to Cyprus or something once a year. But don't bother us, and we'll leave you to your own devices. But we promise that we won't have the chaos of the 90s. And now they're having drones flown into their cities. And they know, as you say, they must know that things are never going to return to the 90s, or to the aughts or the 10s, or the early 20s, 2020s. It's over.
It's over.
What do you think that means? Is this all? Does Putinism survive? Or do you think things are going to have to change?
I believe that maybe the West doesn't understand, like majority of people who are not specialized in Russia, most of the people believe that Russia is some like united country with the same ideology, with the same goals and purposes. No, Russia is an occupied.
Well, Elvira, I'll admit to you, I've been studying your native country for over 30 years. I speak, albeit very badly, Russian, and I still feel like I'm just scratching the surface. It is a very complex nation. But again, is this war, is the crisis that Russia finds itself in a result of Putin, or is it a result of the heritage and the culture and the trauma of Russia's history?
I believe that, so I continue my thought, that the problem is that if a nation wants to be a happy nation, it should be free nation. But Russia is occupied nation. And it was occupied from the very beginning, because the elites, they behave not like part of Russia. They behave pretty much like the Spanish conquistadors in South America. They were separate from the locals. They don't feel that they are the same. They even look different. They spoke different language. And they believe that the local population is beneath them, and they never count the deaths. It didn't matter, because those people were less than them. And in South America, we still see the same patterns. In Russia, the same. And it runs from the very beginning of the Russian state, because Russian state was initially conquered by Vikings. Vikings, of course, they had Russian wives, they start speaking Russian, they feel like they are Russia. But their Russia is totally different from my Russia or the Russia of the people from my city, the common people. Because if they proclaim that we love Russia, and they do everything to harm it, to harm the very social fabric, to the economy, that means that their Russia is something else, and this something else is their social class. And how to determine the social class in this particular situation is if you have the position in state hierarchy, and if you have access to resources. That's how you start to build. That's how you belong, and how to show it to your surroundings that you are in, that you are part of elite. You have to show spending, that you have the luxury cars, the very beautiful mistresses, watches. Like, who buys very expensive watches right now when everybody has the watch on their phone? Like, why do you have to go to buy the Swiss watch that costs like $30,000 or something else? Because it's like a shoulder strap for in the military uniform. You show your rank.
And you always have to be showing power. I'll tell you a quick anecdote from when I lived in Moscow. Okay, so here was a famous anecdote that was said a lot when I was living in Moscow in the 90s. Two oligarchs meet on the street. One of them has an enormous gold watch, and he says to the other oligarch, he says, "Look at my brand new watch. Isn't this fantastic? It has direct connection to Greenwich Mean Time, and it can go down to 40 meters in scuba, and it's fantastic. Look, look, look." And the other oligarch goes, "Oh, yes, that's indeed very." He says, "Yes, indeed, that's a very nice watch. Where did you get it, and how much did you pay for it?" And the first oligarch says, "Oh, I got it at the jewelry store around the corner. I paid $500,000 for it." The other oligarch goes, "Oh, you fool! There's another jewelry store just around the other corner where they sell it for $1 million."
Perfect.
It's status.
Yes, exactly. So I had a question from one of my subscribers who asked, like, why Russian oligarchs don't invest into Russia's future and invest in yachts. I recorded the whole video about that because it deserves dissection. Because
Yes.
In this world, you have to just belong to the elite. You have to show these like status symbols all the time, and you should
And it's always binary. It's always binary. Somebody's always on top of somebody else. They've created that system of everything is a win or a lose, and there is nothing in between.
And I can tell you that
right?
I know a person who used to be a deputy ministry in Moscow. What's going on with people who stop showing off, who stopped belonging to the system?
Flexing.
Yeah,
Constantly
that's
flexing.
miserable, especially for an ambitious young man who he's not young anymore. But what happened if you used to be like one of the, you belong to the very elite. Like deputy minister is a huge, it's a great career. Right now he is in some provincial city ruling the local water pipes, and he feels and he drinks a lot, and he feels like his life is bad. Because if in America, for example, if you are a former president, you have the whole life in front of you. You can you can do teaching, you can consult, you can do tons of things. Your life is not over. But in Russia, if you just step out from the system, your life is over. Nobody is care about you. You could be even dangerous to even associate with you, especially if you step down because you had some problems with the authorities. And that is why you can enter the elite. But how to get out from it? Immigration. If you are not very important, you can immigrate. But if you're somebody like Elvira the Russian bank, the boss of the, how to say it? that
of the
she,
Bank of the Exchequer or the
so she's the
Ministry
top,
of
yeah,
Finance.
the head of
Yes,
the Russian state bank. She can't quit.
right.
It's impossible. So for her, the only way to get out is from the 17th floor or to the to prison.
Mm.
And she knows that the financial system of Russia is just shaking. So the Russian state right now looks like a broken car which is shaking. It's still moving forward, but it's shaking. The engine is roaring. You can hear that something is wrong, and you
The tires are
yeah,
flat.
tires of da yeah da tires are flat.
Doug.
And
It's
yeah, everybody's inside. They know that something is really bad is going to happen, and the question is how bad, and for whom, and how the people will survive. And there are like a range of different hypotheses, like what is the future of Russia and what could happen. And everybody in the, again, among intelligentsia who dare to speak at all, they ask each other these questions like what's now, because it's impossible to stop the war. The war machine is huge, and the only way to stop it is a military defeat. That's it, or a huge financial crisis, which will be, I don't know, because Putin still has money, and since the war is his like life goal, he will never abandon it on his own. Never. And it's very important. Another thing that I try to explain to anybody who is interested to listen, that Russia is ruled by the rules of male alliances. People start to think about like conspiracy theories, like everything is so complicated. No, no, no. There, at the very top, are people with education of like evening school of KGB. They are not, they are street smart, but they are not educated. That's why they miscalculate over and over and over again, because they just don't have this connection. Why don't they? One, they didn't learn because there's only 24 hours in the daytime, right? And they are occupied with their fights, turf fights, and they are too busy to just survive in this like pool with crocodiles, and they just don't have time to study anything. It's impossible. And since they don't rotate and don't the people in power, they don't change. They sit on their spaces for decades, literally, and that wraps their minds very, very seriously. So my thought was that in this situation, it's impossible to stop the war from the Russian side, because there's so many people who try to earn as much money as possible, because they know that something bad is going to happen. And the only way to secure themselves and their families is to have as much resources as you can. That's why they steal as much as they can right now. And since the war provides them the only option to steal uncontrollable without any control. Yeah, uncontrollably. It's what they do. Like, just a small example, what they do. They have like a storage of shells, for example, or rockets.
Yeah.
And they stole everything. It's empty. Then they make an explosion and says like, oh, Ukrainian drones destroyed it. Sign it off. And billions of rubles go like that. And if we read reports from the army, from the low level, same. They do the same. Just at the very top, they build like a huge construction sites, and at the very low level, they just say that I lost my rifle, but in reality, they just sold it to the criminal gang operating right there, something like that. And so the whole system is very, very broken. And there's like, in my opinion, there's just zero chance for Russian state to win the war in terms
Mm-hmm.
of winning. I don't know. For me, it's very
Yeah.
painful to dive deep into Ukrainian affairs. It's just personal, because when I start reading about it, I just
Mm-hmm.
start crying. It's uncontrollable, and I don't know if Ukraine can stand the, because in many ways Ukraine has the same heritage as Russia, same corruption problems, same attitudes. A lot of people are just earning money on this war from the Ukrainian side. So the problems are the same. If Ukraine can stand and can survive this push, then that's great. But I don't know if it can. Again, I never go deep there because painful. It's painful for me. But for Russia, it's impossible to win this war because what? Let's imagine they occupied all of Ukraine. Now what? Do they have money to support it? No. They're like all the brains will immigrate immediately to Europe, and they'll have a lot of babushkas and a lot of people who
Yeah.
hate them. And how to control all this crowd? Millions of people who hate you like very, very deeply. You don't have enough soldiers. You don't have enough money, and your economy is in shambles. Like how? It's the basically that's the same mistake the Germans did, and I thought that the problem of Germany when they attacked the Soviet Union in World War II, they believed they could control those vast territories. No, it's impossible. They just run out of money, fuel, and basically any kind of resource. Because if you want to have a garrison in every village, in every town, you don't have enough men. You can
Well, that's what
mobilize
it's going
all
to
your.
take.
Mhm.
That's what it's going to take. This is one of the fascinating things when I watch Russian television, or occasionally when I speak to my old Russian friends, which is increasingly rare because they don't want to. In the same sentiment that you're expressing, I don't think they want to talk to me because it's painful because they know the truth. Um, but when I look at media and sometimes when I hear from my Russian friends, there's a denial of the trauma that Russia is inflicting
It's
on
painful.
Ukraine that will not be forgiven, will not be forgotten, will not be forgiven. And, like there's talk of if you get rid of Zelensky, that the Ukrainians will stop fighting. That's not true. Ukraine is not about Zelensky. Ukraine is about Ukrainians, and they will resist. I mean, even if the armed forces of Ukraine were to somehow fall apart immediately overnight, which is not going to happen, you would still have an insurgency. You would still have partisan warfare. You would have to. You're right.
Of course, partisan war for years, and they just don't have enough young men to police this. You can pay, like Putin can pay Belarusian police to control their like very small population of Belarusians, but Ukraine is not Belarusia. Belarusia. The right word is Belarusia. So there's no way, and it feels like they continue the war just to stay in power right now, because everybody, maybe besides the very top brass, they already understand that this is a national catastrophe. And I believe that the result will be basically in any. It doesn't matter what will happen in the battlefield, in the like general scheme of things, in historically, because Russia has already lost the war. It burned all its resources. It burned its generation of young people. They said that like about a million. I don't know the exact numbers, but a million young men were died or got wounded, maimed or shackled. Even when we bump our head just against the kitchen door, the cabinet of the kitchen door, right? It's painful. You just you ruined your day. And if they have a shell shock like day after day during 3 years, come on. They will be disabled people.
We were talking about Russia's kind of stuck. They can't stop the war, and they can't keep the war going because they're losing so much money, they're losing so many men. Um, sanctions are definitely starting to bite. Let's pick up there again. So, what what do you think happens to Russia after the war?
There are several possibilities, and it really depends on like a lot of key factors. First of all, the main problem of Russia is the concentration of resources in basically in one hands. Uh, Putin is the person who accumulated all the power and all the wealth, and he surrounded himself with yes people who who are not
Mm-hmm.
fighters. And that means that the whole hierarchy of the state's people, they they are afraid for themselves, for their own security, and for the security of their families. But they know that if something bad happens to Putin, that means that something bad will happen to them and to their wealth and to their position. And since in Russia, as I mentioned before, in the West, if you were at the top, you still have life ahead of you. In Russia, this is not how it works. That's why, and Putin makes sure that this system will preserve itself. That means that everybody around him has their interest in him staying in power, because otherwise there will be, it's not about history or society or chaos or whatever. It's physical possibility to survive. It's very
Mm-hmm.
very personal. And I talk to a lot of people who have influence, who are in the top positions, and everybody say, what can I do? Like even people who have millions of dollars, people who have power, who are like at the very top, they say like, I can't do anything. And this paralysis of will, imagination, of, I don't know, mental capacity maybe. So what will happen really depends on Putin's health, basically. We'll see. Will he live another 20 years or 3 years or 1 year? We don't know. I don't believe
Yeah.
in revolution in Russia right now, at least from everything that I know about the society, the economy, about everything, and I watch it closely. There's no fuel for it, because all the masculine revolution is a masculine thing, and I believe it's
Mm-hmm.
very important to remember who we are. Our civilization is just 4,000 years old, like the all the human, and all the previous history, we lived in tribes. So the structures, the behavioral programs we have, we inherit them from that time. And revolution and removal of alpha male is a man's thing. Women don't do this. And where are the men? The question. The male energy is spent on war nobody needed, nobody wanted. And like 3 years ago, ask basically anybody besides the street psychers, like, do you want a war with Ukraine? Of course not, because it was a personal project of Vladimir Putin, and his cronies, who some of them dreamed of the great Russia again, or someone just supported because it was so much easier to steal money from the military operations. It's just like a
Mm-hmm.
bonanza, Klondike. And
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
I remember, I told you that we defaulted to 1914. The strange parallels are there. I write books about the Russian Revolution and what happened after that. That's my area of expertise. I just know this stuff.
Right.
And it is amazing. It amazes me because I see parallels. What we have, like in 1914, and what we have right now. Everything started, it will be a quick war, just easy. Why do we start it? Because we need access to sea. Basically, that's the main idea. Why how they
Control of the Black
explain,
Sea.
yeah, how they explain it to people who at least ask this question. And next thing is, we'll mobilize our society. The society doesn't want to be mobilized. It just wants to live its own life. But still, the society can't resist the violence. And some of them go to war believing it's patriotic. But very soon they discover no, the soldiers hate their commanders because commanders send them to die all the time, and every soldier know that commander doesn't care at all. What they want is just a possibility to survive for themselves, and what it means that if your platoon is destroyed, that means you will be sent to the rears and wait there for 2 months until you have new
Yeah.
soldiers. You'll train them a little bit a week. Again, you buy time, hoping, and all the way they get the money. So their strategy there is just surviving another day. And at the top is it's different. They know that something bad is about to happen, and they know that they have to accumulate as much resources as needed for the times of trouble, and they know it will happen. Again, same as in during the World War One, and the outcome will be very much similar because at some point in February 1917, the very structure of Russian society started to crumble because the state became bankrupt. Basically, it didn't have enough money. It still had people, but not enough money to run the economy. And Russia goes this direction exactly. And what
Yeah.
happened after that? They start to change. There was a revolution. They removed Tsar Nicholas the Second. But if they don't have institutions and leaders who are already popular, and Putin made sure that there would be any institutions and no leaders, then there is a power vacuum, and who will fill it? It's obvious, people with rifles, people who is not afraid of violence, and who is ready to shoot
Mm-hmm.
people who look like them. And guess who they are? The people who were in the Ukrainian fronts.
Yeah.
And so the idea,
So they've
so
got a
you,
whole they've got a whole class. They've got a whole class of young men or men
mm-hmm,
armed, traumatized, who if the war were to stop tomorrow, they would be coming back to a country with no work,
mm-hmm.
and they have the trauma and the weapons,
Yeah, guess what
and
were they all
that
doing?
is
I talked to a friend of mine like a couple of weeks ago. He works as some big boss in the energy sector, and I asked him about the future. I asked him like, what do you think about what's going on? Because he goes to Moscow all the time and talks to Duma, to the people in Russian parliament. So he's at that level, and he said that the main
mm-hmm.
fear is the fear of returning soldiers, because they believe that those people felt entitled for benefits, for money, for social position, for respect, and of course the society wouldn't provide it. And then they start to they will be looking for scapegoats, and who is to blame? Of course, those who are
Mm-hmm.
wealthy right now, who is established right now, and they will attack them, and they have no zero possibility to defend themselves. And that is why the most clever governors right now, or people with money, they start building their own security services right now. They don't talk about it openly because it's too dangerous. The state doesn't want competition, but still they had those gangs or platoons, or how to say it, armed men who is ready to defend, basically to sell their fighting for money. And
Yep.
so it will be
And when the
set.
center and you Yeah, well, you describe it as a feudalist system, and I agree with you. But what
Mhm.
happens if you abruptly remove the center of gravity in a feudalistic system? You have a bunch of lower, people, as you're mentioning, with money, starting to build their own personal militias and creating little fiefdoms as the center of gravity falls apart. That is a
There's a
terrifying
little
possibility.
thing. Yeah, yeah, I know that a lot of people in the West are talking about disintegration of Russia. Maybe somebody hoping it will happen because that means that Russia as a whole is not a threat for the West anymore. But there's a little problem. Russia is a landlocked country. All its
Hmm.
wealth is distributed over huge territories, which means that if you, let's say, like some governor secured for himself a patch of oil fields somewhere, and now what? Without cooperation with the rest of the country, you can't do anything with your oil because you don't have access to sea. And same, and that is why Russia integrates over and over again, all the times, even when it's just economy. If it's easy to be to have a feudal system in Germany, for example, because you have rivers, you have ports, you have mild, relatively mild climate, and every city can survive by its own as an economy entity. In Russia, that's not the case. In China, it's not the case. In China, the same problem. You can't economically survive even if you're sitting right there on the pile of gold, but without access to international markets, you can do anything about it. That is why they have to cooperate, and that is why they always compete to control not the resource, but the distribution system and the tax collecting system and the system of foreign trade. That is why almost always in Russian history, the foreign trade was a monopoly of the state because that was the
Hmm.
lifeline. That was the source of all power. I always thought that like accents in Russian history put in the wrong way. People start studying great tsars, Peter the Great, Catherine the Great, all those tsars, generals, or revolutionaries. No, that's the wrong way to look at Russian history. We need to study its economical system. Because if Peter the Great, in the end of the 17th century, inherited empire that was dirt poor with no money to pay for anything, they had troops, streltsy, basically the Russian army. They didn't pay them enough money, so they had to open their shops in the markets to feed themselves and their families. But suddenly, Peter the Great got the money from somewhere to build an army. The question is, how did he get them? And the answer is foreign trade. Again, every time we see that Russia builds an army, a massive army, just rewind the tape a decade ago, before that, and see the commercial agreements with the West. So the history
Yeah.
repeats itself over and over and over. The West don't pay attention to Russia because it's somewhere far away. Nobody cares about it. There's some savages who want to kill each other. Okay, we'll let them do that. We have our own problems. We need timber to build our fleets. We need sails to sail somewhere. We need hemp. We need wood. We need iron for
Gas,
our
well,
cannons.
and in the modern era, gas and oil.
Gas and
The
oil.
West
We
wants gas
always
and
need
oil.
something,
Yeah.
something from Russia. Russia brings it. The prices, Russian prices always are cheap. Why? Because they don't pay those people who actually grow these crops or extract these resources from the ground. They are either serfs or prisoners. It's a slave system. And Gulag
Yeah.
was not the it was not political police entity. It was a slave state. an extraction company. It just grab people for what? To have free labor. Free labor means low prices. Low prices means that the Germany will buy timber for their railroads for cheap. And this system is, we can't blame only Russian elites for all what's going on. No, because on the other end, there's always people who solve their own problems right now, just which will result in building strong authoritarian regime in a decade or so. They will build an army. They will burn this army because it's hugely inefficient. Then they lick their wounds, and the cycle repeats over and over and over again. That's the problem. And until the West makes it decides, it's a decision. We will do business with Russia only on the condition that it's safe for us and for Russian people too. Because without removal of this system, we are just doomed to repeat this cycle again. It goes on for basically for 400 years already. And it will repeat itself,
Well, and
because that's how society works.
Yeah. And I would add that also, to stop the cycle, true reforms are eventually going to be needed in Russia. And the Russians themselves, when they really look themselves in the mirror, know in their heart of hearts.
And I need to add something else. If we look at the Russian society from the Western perspective, we treat them like people who got Western education and Western experience. But to understand what's going on inside the country, we need to put ourselves into their shoes. Their perspective is different. Their body of knowledge is different. Their experience is different. Their survival strategies are different. And why don't you build democracy? It's better for you. Obvious, right? No. Because if a person never in their life voted on the fair elections and don't even heard that it's possible, they believe it's not possible. Like, again, I just talked to the guy I described you from the energy sector. I told him that I have a YouTube channel and my mission is just to bring knowledge about Russia, so the people who can make decisions could at least get information, like what's going on. He said it doesn't matter. I said, like, no, it does matter. If people are educated, if they have knowledge, they can do the right things. He said, no, they don't care about anything but their own pockets. See, this guy believes that everybody in the West acts like he would do because he has his specific Russian experience. And people in the West believe that he, in his position, he should do something. He's a big guy. He is important. He has resources. And because if somebody in Washington in this situation will have the same power and same resources, he will do something. He will act. But see, those picture, like mental picture about the world, how the world works, is different. And we can't communicate.
You'll never understand the Ruskaya Dusha. I don't know how many times, when I lived in Russia, I was told, you will never understand us because you will never understand the Russian soul, the Ruskaya Dusha. My impression of that, however, is that's a lovely excuse to be lazy, drunken, and absolve yourself of any involvement.
Yeah, no. It's not about that. If people say you don't understand Ruskaya Dusha, Russian soul, that means that it's very, I will say it in a polite way. It's very difficult to say to hungry people, if you don't have bread, eat cake. The famous expression of a person who grew up in the free country and see that his parents can do stuff, their mayor can do stuff, everybody can do anything. They influence the future. So when with this attitude you come to Russia and say, like, why can't you do the same? People say, like, huh? And this
Yeah.
misunderstanding is not about laziness, it's about survival tactics. For example, I'll give you an example. My grandfather was a Soviet army officer, and he returned to after World War II. He returned to his hometown, small town, and he became like a police officer there because he was 23 or something like that. And he did not denounce some neighbor or somebody, just like a minor thing. Somebody stole flour and he didn't go there investigate immediately, and he was arrested for that, sent to Gulag for 5 years. And he was decorated war hero. He was the one of the officers who actually he was in Siberia in the Japanese Kwantung army surrendered to him and his buddies in the August of 1945. He was decorated like military hero, and he was arrested. He was sent to Gulag without like anything, without any guilt, and he was traumatized for life of this experience. My family never talk about that. I learned that my grandfather was in prison for 5 years or 7 years, several years, and he. I learned about that when he died, and like 10 years later. My family never talk about that, but my father, you can hear in his speech that he's always afraid. He's always afraid of knock on the door because that's how he grew up.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody has the same trauma. Just like ask everybody. Everybody had someone in Gulag. Everybody, some relatives. The state robbed them, beat them. A lot of people, millions of people were just shot dead. And when you have this experience, and your strategy of survival is just like stay calm, stay low, don't show any political alignments with anybody. And it runs in families because all the Russian people who live today are descendants of survivors. Those who in the during the early years of 20th century, we lost tens of millions of people in different wars and purges, and we are descendants of survivors. Who survived? Those who tried to stay in the rear, those who tried to stay low. And my grandmother said that it was in her. She was born in 1919, so she was in her early 20s during the World War II, and she told me that it was for her generation was incredibly difficult to marry because there were no men who are at least whole, without with all his legs and arms. And a lot of people just were shack-shouldered or hit in the head or didn't have eye or half of their jaw.
Or lived in a bottle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the only psychotherapy at the time was a bottle of vodka. People saw their friends torn apart. And the bottom line, I don't want the world to pity Russians. No, I just try to explain that the easiest metaphor for this is if you take a child from the street who was beaten all his life, he never had proper parenting. He lived in the street and find his food in the trash piles, survived somehow. Of course he will be violent. Of course he will hating the world. And we can talk to this person and say like, come on, be a proper man, study something, learn the trade, be an honest, stop lying, stop stealing, stop being an asshole. How? The question is how? If all his background says that the only survival tactic is to lie, to steal, to oppress those who are weaker than you, and that's and if this person somehow found money on the street, the resources, natural resources, and buy himself a nice suit and buy himself a nice car, will it fix his head? No. So the only way to fix this situation. And again, another point. If you talk to this child already, like young man, for example, and tell him you're a thief, you have mental problems, you have severe trauma, and you need to fix yourself somehow, he'll say like, what? I am a proud person. I am the top guy in the street. He will just like пошлет, the expression.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bassolting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm gonna wrap it up here before we have another technical issue, and I have just two more questions to you. And you kind of already have gone into this, but I do want to ask you. We have a common cause. I'm trying to explain Ukrainians and the conflict, and to a certain extent my knowledge of Russia. And I think you're right. And perhaps I was being too harsh on saying the Ruskaya Dusha is an excuse to be lazy, although there is some of that. I've witnessed it myself. But you're absolutely right. Part of it is the trauma of everything that the country has gone through, and this idea of, any involvement that unlike other countries, any involvement with the state is usually a negative thing for a Russian citizen.
Yes.
Even going and getting your driver's license, and
Exactly.
you go down to the DMV in California, you get your driver's license. As frustrating as that process is, it works, and you're not at risk making contact with the government. Whereas in Russia, you're going to be into
And
you're
it
going to end up paying bribes
surprised me.
yeah. What has been the most difficult thing for you as you try to explain Russians and Russian identity to a Western audience, particularly, I suppose, an American one?
You know
What's been
what?
the
I was
most
surprised.
difficult thing to explain?
Probably that was not the other side. It was me. Because since I lived in America for 20... Oh, you froze? Oh, no, you're here. I live in
Nope.
America for more than 20 years. And I came here as a writer, believing that nobody cares about Russia at all. So I kept... First, I didn't speak English well enough to actually... Are you here? You froze?
Yeah, I'm here.
You're here. So, once again, the problem was from on my end, because I believe that nobody cares about Russia at all. Nobody cares about me as a Russian writer, and it's just impossible to talk to people because they will look other way. And since being a Russian writer is my self identity, that's who I am. I decided that I wouldn't even try to express myself or what I believe or what I know about Russia. And I kept silent. I didn't talk. I came to YouTube out of desperation because of my because I opposed the war publicly. I can't publish my books anymore in Russia, so I had to switch to English language, English channel, start selling my books on Amazon. And for me, it was the only way. And I was genuinely surprised how intelligent, well-educated my audience is. I got I started posting my videos about Russia in January of this year, and right now I have more than 60,000. I don't remember the exact numbers, as always. More than 60,000 subscribers. It happened in half a year. And this genuine interest was a shock for me. And then I asked ChatGPT to find somebody like me doing the same thing, like being Russian, talking about Russia, and there's no competition. I just noticed that people. So why we don't understand each other? Because nobody's speaking. Why Russians don't speak? Because they believe that nobody will listen anyway. So what's the point? It takes so much effort to start speaking in foreign language. It takes just learning the craft. Like a fellow YouTuber, you know how difficult it is. Just connect everything. And people believe nobody cares. There's no interest. Ask people around how I decided that the world doesn't care. I went straight to Amazon and checked the bestseller lists. Like, is there any books about Russia in the popular having sales? No. Movies? No. Like games, maybe some games. And when we feel that nobody cares, we just decided that okay, we will live in our own bubble because that's the only option we have. And the surprise for me was that we didn't even try. And I tried, and I have like a small Telegram channel. I talk to there. I just write about my experience, what I'm doing. I have two channels, one about politics and history, another one is about fiction. And I publish there the songs, the stories that couldn't be published in Russian part because of the anti-war statement of the authors. Because I'm not alone. There's like tens of thousands, like people like me, but a lot of them live abroad in their own Russian bubble, and the outside world have no idea about them. But they are famous in their own bubble. And so those people in my Telegram channel, they say like, you're inspiring. If you can do it, if people actually are ready to listen to you with your half broken English and if you're making mistakes, you are not perfect in any way, maybe we can do it too. And I believe that just these narratives about what is possible and not possible is the main point. And I'm so grateful to all my subscribers who are actually made me believe in myself that I can do something important. It was eye-opening experience for me. Remember, 20 years I lived in my perfectly curated California world, being famous in Russia. Like I go anywhere outside, like talking to other moms, talking to neighbors, they have no idea who I am. Literally, I never talked about like what I'm doing, what I can bring to society, because I believed that they are not interested in the first place. So that's the point. Mm-hmm. We just need to rebuild the communication system because the communication is broken. That's the main problem between the nations. And it's not only Russian problem. Chinese, same. North Korean, same. Iranian, same. We can't communicate because we believe it's impossible. That's it.
Mm. Well, thank you very much. I have one last quick question to ask you. Unfortunately, it's deserves probably a longer response, but I always like to ask people who have some common experiences, albeit in reverse. You are a Russian who has gone to America. I am an American who has gone into the Russian sphere. Ukraine is not Russia, distinctly not Russia. But I've gone the other direction than what you have done. And I often ask this question to people like us. It's often said that America and Russia are actually quite similar. We're both large countries, multicultural. We think we're special. We have a special place on the planet.
Messianism is our thing.
Yeah. But I think there's one inflection point between the Russians and the Americans, and I'd like to get your response to it, if briefly. America fought its way into nature. The country we call America arrived on the shores with the Native Americans already being there, but they fought their way into nature. It was a view of nature that was it was optimistic. We can tame and conquer nature. Russia, it seems to me, clawed its way out of nature with a with a deep respect, albeit perhaps a fear of nature because of the brutality. I think that might be a very large divergence point between our two countries, even though we have all these other similarities. And I'd like to
I
Ask
believe
what you
that,
think of
yeah,
it.
I believe that the problem, the difference, the key difference is geography. Because an
Mm.
American farmer, let's put him somewhere in the middle west, can sustain a family and a farm. And basically, he can live by himself. No, he doesn't need anybody. He needs just tools. And since he
Hmm.
have Mississippi River or some tributaries of Mississippi River, he can sell his crop going all the way down to New Orleans, sell to the world markets. And let's imagine my great grandfather, who is in central Russia. His river goes to Arctic Ocean, and he can sell there anything, and he can survive by himself. If he grows crops, so he needs a middleman who will deliver his crops somewhere. He can sustain his family and his farm. That's why we don't have farmers. We have commune. There's in America and in Great Britain, in Netherlands, in all Western world, a farmer basically could feed his family and live independently. In Russia, in Poland, in northern Germany, all these countries with harsh climate and no access to the sea, we have the same partner. We have served them, and we have the entity is the communal the community, the village community,
Hmm.
because you can farm your land only with the help of your neighbors, and that is the huge difference. That is why a person feels small compared to everybody else. In America, a person doesn't feel small. A person feels that he can do something. He can improve his life. My great grandfather thought that he can do anything because that was true. That it was not some mental mistake. No, it was true. He could not because the climate was harsh, and you need fuel, and for winters. Winters in America is not that harsh. That's okay.
Hmm.
We wear just jackets here. Even in the northern parts, that's not that bad. And in Russia, especially right now, we have global warming, and during the all the we have like little ice age since the 17th century up to the 19th century. It was brutal winters, and in this environment, a person so it's not about conquering nature or taming nature or be friends with nature. It's about economy. Can you feed your family or not? Can you sell your crops somewhere or not? Do you need a middleman to help you to do this? No. Like why Vikings were so effective? Because they have cod in the sea. If you have a boat, you can feed your family. Just go out sea and fish, and that's it. And your family is fed. But in Russia, in this central land, you can go anywhere because you can move only with your neighbors, and that's what they did. The villages migrated because if they used the land here for 3 years, then they have to move the village because the land was empty after 3 years, and they didn't have enough cattle to because the main fertilizer at that time was manure. And in Great Britain, in all Western Europe, they had a lot of cattle. In Russia, no. Why? Because the season of agriculture is 2 months shorter. That means that the peasant have to work the land to feed his family and have no time to collect enough hay to feed the cattle. That's why Russian peasants wore lapti, the bast shoes. And when we see the medieval pictures of any Western peasant, belt belts made of leather, shoes are made of leather.
Hmm.
Leather is not that expensive because everybody has cattle. So those different things they explain a lot.
Well, I am very grateful to have the exchange of ideas with you today.
Mhm.
I don't want to come off as somebody who hates Russia. I lived in Russia. I have a great deal, many great Russian friends. It's just obviously, I'm a little upset with Russia right now since they're trying to
Me too.
shoot at me
Oh,
regularly.
we're on the
But
same page.
I really genuinely do hope that when Russia loses this war, that they will take a good, long, hard look in the mirror and make those changes. And I hope that the West is there to
Doing
support
better
that.
than the
So
previous time.
voices than the 90s, absolutely. We have to have you back on because there's so much more to talk about. Hopefully we won't have the technical issues, but keep doing what you're doing. I think you're right. I think one of the best things that all of us can do is to just keep talking and explaining to larger
Exactly.
audiences about these very, very complex and
Yes.
difficult and hard questions. So,
Mhm.
Elvira, Bary, thank you so much for your time. I will continue to watch your material. I hope you will tune into On the Edge occasionally, and it's been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you
Thank
so
you for
much.
your
I
time.
really enjoyed it. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.